be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
The Hockey Time Machine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Tonight, we're going to speak with two courageous men, Alan Globensky and Jim Thompson. Courageous not so much because they were two of those so-called hockey enforcers, but because after retirement, they've spoken publicly about the terrible toll fighting took on their lives, and because they've worked to raise awareness so future players don't have to suffer the way they did and still do. Jim Thompson, we're honored to spend a few minutes with him. We read the stats about Jim Thompson. You'll learn, as I did, he once scored 25 goals in 41 games with Baltimore of the AHL. He played 115 total NHL games, and you'll see that he had 124 fights, 41 in a single season. But what you won't find is that contributed to severe health problems, both emotional and physical. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with us.
Oh, my pleasure, Glenn. It's great to be here tonight.
Both your parents died of alcoholism. You had older brothers who were into drugs, and you were the youngest of 10 children. So do you feel like you were behind the eight ball right from the start?
I was, and I always say this, that my parents were the best parents they knew how to be. And we grew up in a different era, a different time. And, sitting out in the car at 3:30 in the morning, waiting for my parents to come out from the bar with my brothers and sisters and a big Chrysler car, things like that. I grew up in a trailer park. So that was a whole nother lifestyle. I always tell when I talk to groups, if you've seen the Trailer Park Boys, that's what trailer park life is like. And a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs, and a lot of crime, and all these different things. And I started drinking and smoking marijuana when I was 12 years old, and got out of it when I was 14. And obviously got back on the right track. Always had the addiction in my body, and ended up playing 10 years pro on 6 NHL teams, and had a decent career, a dream. It was a dream career for a kid from a trailer park who grew up the way I did. So, yeah, it was a unique upbringing for sure.
You take up hockey, and in junior, you tell the story about catching this big, bearded, older player with what you described as a lucky punch, only
hmm
it didn't really turn out to be that lucky because it seemed to have pigeonholed you as a fighter.
Yeah, so I was 14 playing junior B. I was a goal scorer, and I'd scored 68 goals that year in midget, and the junior B team called me up. And I remember in warm up, I'm like, where am I? And all these monster 20-year-olds and this big guy with a beard. And next thing you know, I'm in front of the net, and he cross checks me to the ice. I get up, and he looks at me like, you want to go? The old words. And, having three, brothers that were bikers and tough guys, and taught me protective instincts and hit first, ask questions later. Well, I hit this guy perfectly on the chin, and he went down. And unbeknownst to me, 14-year-old kid in Devon, Alberta, knocks out one of the tough guys in the junior B loop. And next thing you know, I started this little reputation. So, that carried on to when I came, I had a couple scraps in training camp, and I didn't come into Toronto from Alberta to be a fighter. And next thing you know, they printed the OHL yearbook, and I made the team. And I'll never forget it. We're driving up to Ottawa on the bus, and they had a profile of every player and this little saying, and under mine it was, Alberta raised winger has established himself as the best fighter on the team. And right away the jolt of fear went through my body, because all the guys are going to be looking, who's this kid? So that was a test of time for me. But yeah, I didn't ask for the role and didn't like the role, but I had a dream of making the NHL, Glenn, and that's what I did.
That unwanted reputation follows you when you're drafted by the Washington Capitals, and the Caps coach Brian Murray tells you what?
So I'd come out of my rookie year and I had 195 penalty minutes. I'm not sure how many majors that year, but for a rookie kid coming out of junior, like, that's quite a bit of fighting. I wasn't a guy that took a lot of misconducts and stuff. And anyways, in my exit meeting, I thought, that would be the least thing that they'd be bringing up. I thought I was going to get complimented on for my toughness and, as a young kid breaking into the American Hockey League, which back then, if you listen to Ellen, back in those days, both fourth lines were fighters. Like, you get jump on the ice and you're scrapping. And, one of the things the late Brian Murray said to me was, if you want to make our team, you're going to have to fight more. And I left that meeting very, I was just jolted. Like, oh my gosh. The next year I had 41 fights in 57 games, led the American League in penalty minutes, and saw my first NHL action. And like I said, I would do anything to live out my dream. And that was not something that I wanted to do. I don't like using the word hate, but I hated fighting. I was a goal scorer, but I would do anything to stay in pro hockey, and riding, 3 fights in 3 nights in the American Hockey League. One weekend I had 7 fights. My hands all, ripped up. And, you have to understand, Glenn, that bare knuckle fighting in pro hockey against some of the biggest, baddest, toughest guys is not an easy thing for a young boy or a young man that's really not into it. But I chose it. I did it. And, I'm here to talk about it.
You actually kind of kept a book on possible opponents. I've read that you took a scientific approach of when to be in the clinches and when to do this and that, so that you didn't lose your fights.
Well, listen, I'm 6'1", 200, and I played, my heaviest was 215 or whatever. You're fighting Stu Grimson 6'6", these monsters. Dave Brown, there's Dave and I right there. Dave Brown at this time was the toughest guy in the league, and if you can see, he's a big lefty. So I got right in tight there and tied up his left. I couldn't go toe to toe with Dave Brown. So I was a strategic fighter. Threw punches when I needed to throw them, but I was not the guy to stand back and go toe to toe with these guys, because I'd never survive. So I hit hard. I played tough. I was not easy to play against, and I did my best with my ability to stay in pro hockey. And the records, whatever, 124 bare knuckle fights over my time. That's a lot of bare knuckle fighting, and it's what I did. But yeah, I studied. I watched videotapes, and every time I would go into a building, I knew exactly who I was fighting. You couldn't get hit by Joey Kosher or Tony Twist. That's just asking for big trouble. So you needed to get in tight with guys like that, So everybody had a strength, you needed to know who left-handers were, because, that was another disadvantage to a guy like me. So yeah, I really took the book on it and studied it just to survive.
And as you've courageously admitted, you, like all hockey fighters, were always one punch away from being out of the NHL. And that anxiety from the enforcer role forced you down a path where you used drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, listen, I had the addiction bug in me from my family. I stopped, went to be serious, obviously. To be a pro hockey player, you can't live that lifestyle and make the NHL. So I was a very serious athlete that always had this addiction. But what I found was, I'm like, it started in Binghamton, New York, when I was playing there, and this is where I was doing all this fighting and going into these dark buildings and fighting these guys that just were monsters and tough men. And So what would happen is, the beer would flow more. I would get, obviously feeling good, if there was pills available or whatever's available and they're feeling good, you get rid of the fear, the anxiety. And then you wake up the next day and you're going into Rochester or Hershey, and you're pounding coffee, Sudafeds to get yourself awake and going. And it was just this chemical imbalance of freezing the pain, waking up to a stimulant, and it was a vicious circle. So yeah, and then the height of it, I'm in LA, and I got a responsibility to help Marty McSorley and Jay Miller take care of the greatest player in the world. And that was a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And so, two glasses of wine at dinner may have turned into a bottle and a half, knocked me out because I wouldn't sleep. Like, we would, we go into Calgary, Craig Berube and all these guys. And I'm like, one punch, I get knocked out and I'm supposed to be taking care of Gretzky. It's over. I'm back to the minors. So yeah, I was a stress case.
Allow me to detour for a second. You acquired at least 3 nicknames that I found in your NHL travels: Top Gun, Horse, and Jimmy Two Times. Where did they come from?
Well, you're good, man. So let's start with Top Gun. So in Washington, Rod Langway, I always loved to go corner, and this is when the movie was, the popular movie. So he was a character, Rod, and he started calling me. He goes, I'd get the odd nice goal in practice or whatever. And actually, my very first NHL goal against Eddie Belfour, it was a top corner goal. So he started calling me Top Gun, and it was just simply because I like to shoot top corner all the time. Horse was in LA, so Bruce McNall, our owner, was into the race horses with Wayne and what have you. So I started really following that and ended up buying some horses down in California. And Luc Robitaille gave me that name, and they started calling me Horse. Jimmy Two Time was in Anaheim, and we were on a trip, and we were watching the movie Goodfellas. And Stu Grimson was sitting beside me, and there's a character in the movie called Jimmy Two Time that say everything twice. So that was where that name came from. Stewie just said, "Oh, Jimmy Two Time," so that stuck with me too. So yeah, those were how I got those names. And whenever I run into that team, I was just talking to Rick Knickel on social media, and he's calling me Horse. Talking to Sean Van Allen from Anaheim, he's calling me Jimmy Two Times. So it's kind of funny how it all goes down. And then back in the day, Sean Simpson or somebody's calling me Top Gun. So it's really, the names carry right through our life.
You also landed a role in a Mike Myers movie, The Love Guru.
Yeah.
By the way, The Love Guru is my Tinder handle.
Oh, no way.
But just go with it.
I'm going with
anyway,
it. Yeah.
I want to ask you about a conversation you had during filming with none other than Bob Probert. But before we do that, what's the backstory of getting cast in a Hollywood movie?
So what happened was, Glenn, they came to Toronto to shoot the movie, and my cousin heard about this Mike Myers movie, and they were looking for pro hockey players. So he got me, in to talk to the producers and all that. And once they realized that, I was a former King, they asked me if I'd be the captain of the Kings and play myself in the movie. And I'm like, yeah, I've never been in a movie, and this is really cool, right? Justin Timberlake and Jessica Alba and all these people, Vern Troyer. So I was honored to play myself in the movie, and I didn't get a speaking line, but I got some scenes in the movie along with Bobby. And there's a lot of pro. Jamie Ellison, the former defenseman, was in the movie, and so there's all this. There's just a great experience. Loved it. Long hours. One thing about shooting a movie, we're long hours in the arenas, but it was a lot of fun. And what's funny is, till this day, somebody will come up to me and say, "I saw you in a movie last night, The Love Guru," and this, like, yeah, that was me. So yeah, good experience, I got to say.
Okay. Remind everybody who Bob Probert was and if you would, the conversation you had, because as you said, he had a role in the film as well.
Yeah. So Bobby came to it. We were playing an alumni game, and this is between, on the weekend, like we had time off of the shooting. And I ended up being in an alumni game with Bobby, and I told him about this movie. And he's like, "Oh, that sounds great." So I called the producer and I said, "Look, Bob Probert would love to be part of this." And he's like, "Bob Probert, of course." So Bobby ended up living with me during the shoot. I think for about 6 months, he would live with me and then go home to his wife, Danny, and her kids on the weekends. So I got to spend a lot of time with Bob in quiet time, sharing stories. Some I can tell, some I can't tell. But I got to, I admired Bob. How tough, in my opinion, and most people's opinion, the toughest guy to ever play the game. He definitely took more liberties than he took, and arguably the greatest fighter in the history of the NHL. So, I'm almost like a fan of that. I was a fan of Semenko with Edmonton. I grew up in Edmonton, but I was the same era as Bob. Played against him in junior, and so I was honored to have him living with me. My kids loved him, and and we shared a lot of stories. And I'll just give you one where I would talk to him about the stress I went through and my abuse and all that, and he started laughing. He looked at me, he goes, "Imagine you," and he goes, "I'm the heavyweight champion of the league, and every time I go in a game, some young guy wants to fight me to make a name for himself." And then I kind of knew that, but to hear it out of his mouth, the pressure and stresses that he was under is just, it was twice what I was going through. And it was just like, wow, that's tough. And, I tell my story. It is my story. Some people didn't like my story. They felt I was throwing the enforcer role under the bus and affecting that. Listen, it's like my parents. They died of being alcoholics and smoking their whole life. Either of them made it to 70. They died of cancer. So, as Ellen was saying earlier, knuckles to the brain and concussions. I had 8 of them documented. Definitely have, as we speak today, right now, Glenn, I got 24-hour straight ringing in my ear. It's been there probably a good 15 years or more. I live with it. It's part of, what I did. And so I feel the effects of it. But yeah, I got to spend, quality time with Bobby, and, we both had our demons and shared a lot of dark stories together.
Another story with the Binghamton Whalers of the WHA. You're in Rochester, and Shane Churla gets up close and personal with some of the fans, and eventually you do too.
Yeah, it was a really unfortunate situation, and Shane got into a fight with the Rochester tough guy, Andy Risto. And during the fight, he was on top of Risto and ended up kneeing him in the privates, and the crowd went crazy. So in Rochester, it was a stadium arena, I think seated about 12,000 or so. But where we would go off the ice was behind our net, and then there was a stage of fans. So we'd have to walk right in front of the stage of fans. So as Shane's going off, the fans are going crazy, obviously. And there was a steel bar on there, and if people watch it on YouTube, there's a steel bar on the stage. And somehow that bar gets thrown, and Shane throws it back, and then all hell breaks loose. And somehow, some way, number 18 in the Hartford Binghamton Whaler jersey, which was me, there was a kid in a white T-shirt, and he was kicking Shane. I'll never forget. He's like, "Shane," because we're the stage is here, so this is kind of, the people are up here, and this kid was kicking and fighting against him, and I was like, I got to help him. And somehow I ended up on the stage, and I took a punch, and thank goodness I missed this kid. And next thing you know, a cop grabs my arm. It was an ugly, ugly scene I'm not proud of. It was a bad time. It's the old saying, you're angry, you're protecting your teammates, but there was no need for that. And Shane did have to go back. He faced charges, and I think he had to go back, and they dropped him. But it was an ugly scene, and something I'm not proud of, and brought up a lot to me. But yeah, thank goodness. And Larry Plow said this to me too. If you would have hit that kid, your career may have been over. And I was just helping a teammate. That was the protect one another. But it was an ugly scene.
I appreciate your honesty about that. Here's something you can be proud of. And I was going to make this the only interview you'd ever do where I wasn't going to bring up Wayne Gretzky.
Mm.
But this is such a compliment. I have to mention it. LA leaves you unprotected. You go to Ottawa, who picks you up in the 92 expansion draft, and Wayne makes sure that the Kings trade to get you back. That's
Yes.
a compliment.
Yeah. So what? Can you hear me? Because my headphones went out.
Yes,
you
I
hear me?
can hear you.
Okay. So what happened was this: I played with LA, and I got picked up by Ottawa in the expansion draft, as you said. And at the Christmas break, we had played the Toronto Maple Leafs and Maple Leaf Gardens. And back then, we didn't have the cell phones and everything. So I came back to the hotel about 11 o'clock. It was the trade deadline for the Christmas break. And when I got to the hotel, the press was all there, and they said, "How do you feel?" And I had no idea what they're talking about. And they said, "You got traded back to the Kings tonight." And I'm like, "Wow." Because, you go from playing with your idol Wayne Gretzky in LA to Ottawa first year team that was really struggling. So it was a great break for me because it's the year we went to the Stanley Cup final. But I met the team in San Jose, and when I got to the hotel, the first person I ran into was Bruce McNall, our owner. And he said to me, he goes, "Listen, I got to tell you something. Wayne made this trade." And I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, because I was a dressing room guy, I was a character guy, and obviously I was, helping Wayne stay safe on the ice. And it was something that, I was just so honored that, they traded a 20 goal scorer, Bob Kadowski, for me. And it just was such a huge compliment to know that my idol made the trade for me. And, even told me, it's as much as I did on the ice, but, how I was a kind teammate and what I did in the dressing room to, be just a good teammate.
2011 is a tragic year. 3 NHL players known for fighting die. Derek Boogaard accidentally overdoses. Rick Rippon's death was a suspected suicide. Wade Belak is found hanging in a Toronto hotel room. Depression is a contributing factor for all three. In the decade plus since 2011, what has changed and what hasn't?
Well, I think the NHL has done a great job in taking out the fourth line enforcers. And I didn't come out, and I forget what year it was when I said the enforcer role is killing these people, because I was very close to suicide 3 times, Glenn, and it was all from my role because of the anxiety, the mental health, and all these things that I experienced. Now we know about mental health and all these things. I understand it now. But I was living in this horror movie, with this lifestyle. And I can tell you, I talked to these guys. I talked to Wade Belak. I talked to Bobby Probert, the toughest guy of all time, and we all lived with the same anxiety and fear. We did a job. We were proud of the job we did, but to a T, we hated it. So when these deaths were happening, whether it was, overdose, suicide, and all that, I had come out and said this. If you go back and, you remember Don Cherry coming on Hockey Night in Canada, calling me a puke, a turncoat, and a hypocrite. And it was because I lived it. And so I can just say this: what the NHL has done is tightened up on this. Fighting is down. I always said this: you don't take fighting out of sports. Fighting will always be in sports, because when you got baseball, football, whatever, but you fight, you're ejected. So instead of hockey saying you get 3 times to fight, you want to fight, you're ejected from the game. You're allowed to fight, but you're gone. You can't play anymore. And that would, definitely tighten the just the amount of majors to the state. Because my problem is the state. These guys are so big and strong, Glenn. You get hit square in the skull with these bombs of punches. It's going to leave long-term damage. Listen to Ellen, listen to me, and I can give you a whole bunch more people that are suffering at this point in their lives that did this role. And we don't even mention football players, where most plays in football, helmet to helmet, and I'm not talking they changed that rule, but off the line, your head's being jolted all the time. So Yeah, the NHL has done a great job in tightening it up because we don't, with the instigated penalty. And, I went through a lot of BS with people calling me out and saying some nasty things about me. But you know what? This is my life and how I feel. And, I don't judge them, and they have a right to feel how they feel. But fighting needs to be eliminated from hockey. You want to fight? You're out of the game.
I want to continue this part of the discussion in a moment when we bring Alan back. But Jim, just like Alan, you found your way out of the abyss, and now you do important, sometimes life-saving work. And I want you to spend a moment telling us all the different things that you're into now, the clinics, the charities, the interventions, and don't be modest.
No, so we'll start with my hockey. I own a junior A team, the Aurora Tigers. I do mentoring for kids year round, so I work with them behind the scenes. I still go on the ice, and I have an NHL prospect camp called JT Prospects where we train all summer. There it is there, and we play in tournaments, and that's just the greatest thing that I can still do that. I work out every day, so I'm in great shape at 56. So I go on the ice with the kids. I work out in the gym with them, so I'm part of it still. It's my way of saying I'm still in the NHL just by being active. And then, like you said, being 15, I'm in my 15th year of sobriety. So, for instance, Saturday night I was in Niagara Falls talking to roughly 400, recovering alcoholics and drug addicts and stuff. And I go around and save people. When I say save people, get a person off crack cocaine or fentanyl, I'm saving their life. So I really believe, Glenn, that my calling wasn't hockey in the NHL. My calling was to get this experience from hockey in the NHL and my addiction to now help people save their lives and, talk at many schools. That's us talking at a school. So, volunteer at the homeless shelter, whatever we can do. I'm in a place in my life now about, my motive is, helping out, being kind, and, making our world better. And I call it one life at a time. And, Saturday I got to go up to a little town in Ontario to help a 27-year-old young man, hopefully get him off of drugs and save his life because, he's in bad shape. And through the pandemic, drugs and alcohol and suicide became a real problem in our society. It took a new turn. So that's what I'm doing. Love it. And, living a healthy life. And I'm blessed.
And as owner of the Aurora Tigers, as you mentioned, share what activities are strictly forbidden to members of the Aurora Tigers.
Drugs, chewing, vaping, smoking, obviously, it's all legal. It's all legal now, but you can't do it under our culture. And I traded a very good hockey player because first I was concerned about his health. He was vaping, and I'm like, we don't even know the long-term effects of that, except it is killing people. And I said, you can't do that here. I don't want you doing that around my young players. And so it was easier to send him elsewhere, and hopefully, he'll understand that it's bad for you. So my culture is very simple. I don't like swearing. I just like be professional, be kind, and play hard, play tough. But just the barbaric end of all that, I want nothing to do with it. And certainly I want nothing to do with my players, getting into anything that's going to hurt them health-wise.
I'd like to ask Alan Globensky to rejoin us. And I know Alan has been listening to my conversation with Jim. First, Alan, any thoughts on what Jim and I have been talking about?
Very impressive and very proud to have met this individual through this process, and he's doing a wonderful job and lived a hell of a life. I have a very close friend who was one of the toughest players I ever played with or against. When I was writing the book, I phoned him. I said, Sudsy, were you ever afraid in your life? And he laughed. He said, Al, think of all the time we wasted being afraid. But when the game started, that went out the window, and Jim can say, let's go. This is my job. So
Yeah.
Very impressive, though.
Yeah, I'm can say, Alan, I'm honored to be on with you. I've read your story, and you've had a tough life, and I'm glad you're here to talk to us today and share your stories with us, because it's important that people listen to this, and it's important they hear that violence is not the answer.
Anything I can do to help you, I'd be glad to. I don't speak French, so Quebec is out of my territory, basically. So let me know, I'll be there.
Thank you.
Take it away, Glenn.
All right. The last set of questions, I'm going to direct them to one of you first, but then the other one, please feel free to chime in. Jim, to start with, you've said, and thank you, now you're no longer in the witness protection program. Most people, they ask me to turn off the light in the room I'm in, but never mind. You said if the role of the enforcer, if it was ever appropriate to be part of the culture of hockey, based on what we know now, it isn't appropriate anymore. Would you speak to that? And then I'll have Alan do that as well.
So again, I say this, that, you know, watching the fighting that's still going on, to me, there's still too much of it, because these guys are so powerful, and knuckles against the skull is not a healthy thing. And the NHL has, I'll repeat myself, has done a good job tightening it up, but I'd like to see it go where, in my league, junior A hockey, you fight, you're kicked out. And it's a beautiful thing. Guys lose their temper. We're men. We got this, you know, we're tough guys, and go hit the showers. And it should be like that in every league. And that way, it's like other sports. You fight baseball, you're out. You fight football, basketball, you're out of the game. Why not the same in hockey? What's the difference?
No question. It's that is beyond insanity. But here's another avenue that they could take. Every player in the NHL, poll them anonymously, so that nobody ever hears what side they picked. Ask each one of them if they would want fighting eliminated from hockey. Now, when some news reporter or TV reporter asks, that gets on TV. The player's not stupid enough to say, yeah, I want hockey fighting out, because he knows that the fighter on his team is either going to run him in practice, or if they get traded, he's going to get the crap beat out of him. But if you asked them away from everything, I would think 80 to 90% of the players in the NHL would say, get rid of fighting. Okay, and that's just my own personal thought. I be interested to hear what Jim has to say about it, but that's it.
I would say this, Alan. I agree with you, because I look at the tough guys in the NHL right now. Milan Lucic is can play. He's had a great year. He can play hockey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this Delorier that was in Anaheim, who's now in Minnesota, they were fighting every game. McDermott in Colorado now. Those are fights we know are going to happen. These are still big, bad, tough guys. But I can tell you this, they can all play. And I know how they feel going into games. The last thing at this point, Milan Lucic's career, that he wants to go out and fight these big monsters. He wants to play hockey, play tough. So I agree with Ellen. You know, those guys may say, no, keep it in, because it does keep their jobs. And I always said this, improve your skills. Everybody in the NHL now can play. Evander Kane in Edmonton's a tough dude. The guy can play and score goals. So I would have to agree. The percentage would be very high, because nobody likes to do it.
No, not even the fighters on the most part. But like you said, even the fighters nowadays can play, and play at that high level. You know, I was way out of where I should have been. But that was my job. My job was to fight. I did it. So life changes.
Let's either dispel a few myths or confirm them if they're true. One of them is that one of the downsides, maybe a downside of being a hockey fighter that people don't think about, is that with the notoriety you get, you have to be ready to fight everywhere, even outside the rink. Alan?
Let me tell you, Glenn, I think I've had 2 fights off the ice. And both of those were trying to help somebody else that was in or getting into a fight. And that's not because people knew who I was and I was supposed to be a tough guy. I just wasn't the type of individual who wanted to fight or be in a fight. Now, and I think Jim will agree, 99% of the people that act tough, when it requires them to be tough, boom, they're gone. They're out the door. They're so far away, you don't know what they're doing. So, but that's life, and life in general in North America.
Jim, did
Yeah,
you feel like you had to have your guard up all the time?
Yeah, so differently than Alan, unfortunately, going out on the weekends to bars, being with my buddies, you always had those guys who wanted to test the tough guy. And after a few drinks, I said it earlier, I didn't like fighting, but I fell into this fighting on weekends in bars. And thank goodness, with the amount of fighting I did off the ice, there was no knives or guns or weapons involved like there is today in a lot of these sad situations. So it was, two guys going at it in a parking lot, which, I could have been seriously injured and killed somebody. And thank goodness I scathed all that. But yeah, I fell into this, guys knew that I was a tough guy in hockey, and they get drunk and start causing crap with you. And it's like, a lot of times I wanted to walk away, but a lot of times you couldn't walk away. And it was like, okay, well, why go to the bars? Well, guess what? I like to drink, and I like, to dance and have fun with my buddies. And normally, towards the end of the night, crap would break out, and I'd be part of it. But, just stupid and not proud of it.
Don't feel guilty. It's inbred in a hockey or athlete to do that, to correct the wrong that's out there, especially when one of your friends are involved. So,
yeah,
you did a great job.
100%.
Or Jim.
Yep, thank you.
Here's a chestnut you hear all the time. Enforcers are necessary to make the game safer for the more skillful players who need their protection. Jim, what do you say to that?
Completely false, because there's nothing now that gets away in a game. If you do something to Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews, there's so many cameras and angles on the ice now. Everything is videotaped. So that is the new enforcer. So to have somebody do something to a player and then we have to go out and straighten that out is nonsense. That's the old days. The game is now policed by social media. So you're not getting away with anything.
Interesting. If you take a look, and society changes every day it changes. But if we look at the violence that is going on in hockey now, it's so much smaller than it was before. And eventually, I think it'll get to the point where, boom, it'll be gone. Just like I think the corrupt politicians and the liar lawyers, when my grandchildren grow to be 18, 19, 20, they're going to start saying, hey, you're out of here, okay? We've had enough of you stealing, robbing, lying to us. We're going to straighten things out. I'm hoping and praying. I don't believe in religion, but I believe there's a creator up there, and I pray to him every night. Hey, make it a better world, and it is becoming a better world. Like Jim says, it's hockey is getting so much better. It just eliminate the fighting. You got no problem. But the problem there is the owners. They're going to lose income because the transfer, the change, which is difficult, will be maybe a couple of years before all those people that never went to a hockey game would come and say, wow, this is a great game. There's no violence. My kid can come and watch. And the other people will be out the door because they don't see any of the fighting or the stupidity. So that I hope happens.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that point, Alan. And one of the problems, because I am in minor hockey, the decline in registration due to violence, due to concussions, due to the safety of the greatest game in the world, has really taken an effect in Canada. So that is a problem. And if we don't clean up, the safety of the game of hockey, it's going to keep declining, and people are going to cheaper sports like soccer, just different sports that doesn't cost as much and it's not as dangerous. So we need to, continue to do a better job in protecting the athlete, as Alan said in his first time talking, that we don't want to see the decline keep going, and it's a little bit freaky of how many people are pulling their kids out of minor hockey because of the violence.
There's going to be better days ahead, and I truly believe that the referees are trying their best, but it's the owners that are telling the referees, call this or don't call that, and call this there, but not in that rink. It's going to evolve over whatever period of time, I don't know. But look at us. We're the teenage bully of the world. We're only 200 years old here in North America. In Europe, in China, in Asia, in Russia, they're thousands of years old. They have a little more appreciation and respect for human beings. And they have a conscience that they use. You look at any mega billionaire, there's no conscience there. It's just a bottom line. That's what they're looking at. That's my opinion, and so be it.
Here's a couple of paradoxical excuses from the pro fighting crowd. One, nobody gets hurt in a hockey fight. And two, opponents in a fight know what they're getting into, and they accept a certain degree of risk. Alan?
I've had 15 major operations. All of them I can connect to hockey. Finger 3 times. My hips have been replaced 4 operations. My knees have been operated on 3 times each. If these people want to go through that and think that hockey didn't have anything to do with it, that's fine. I can't change their minds. But the way we played the game, and we're getting better, as Jim said, it's going to get better. It just has to eliminate this insane violence. And we don't need body contact until the kids are 18 years old. And that's my belief. And so be it. So
I will say this, that, it goes back to the safety of the athlete. Like this whole, the anti, people who want fighting, I say watch UFC. You love fighting, watch UFC, watch a night of UFC. There's tons of fighting there. So it's one of these things where, we as the hockey world have to keep working to make it better. And Alan said this, it will get better, and we're getting better. But, it's damage control as we go along, and, talking to families and kids about, why to stay in hockey and all that. So all I'm saying is this, we're on the right track, but we need to keep the athlete safe.
Jim, Allen has said that he yapped a lot on the ice, and he also liked interacting with opposing fans. Did you?
No, I wasn't a talker, and I was just, I'd go out, and I was in an era similar to Alan that when we jumped on the ice, it was Stu Grimson dropped on the ice and we lined up beside each other. We knew like there was no need to talk. So I wasn't that guy that was yapping at the other bench, and I just went about my business and my job and never got involved with fans except that one time in Rochester. But I was a pretty quiet guy.
Alan, why did you like talking to the opponent's fans?
My wife says I'm a people person. If I'm in a restaurant and see something different, or they have a couple of children that are acting very well, I'll go over to the table and talk to the people, or try in Quebec. And I enjoy that. So when I played, if people were yapping and whatnot, I would try to play with them. And you're talking to me, I would look around and to try to engage them in some sanity, for them to come back down to a level to realize I'm a human being too, just like you. I don't need to be called or have my mother called names. You wouldn't like it. Well, I don't like it. But that's the way the sport was, and hopefully will be different in the future.
Alan, in your book, you express amazement during a fight in juniors with a future Broad Street bully, Bob Kelly. So you have this fight, and then afterward, he says to you, "Hey, good fight." And I've also heard Archie Henderson, who once racked up 410 penalty minutes in a minor league season, say, "It's just business. It's not personal." Now, I can accept that when I'm watching a Godfather movie. It's not personal. It's just business. But explain for those of us who aren't part of the culture, how can guys who have just finished scrambling each other's brains have such respect and even warm feelings for each other?
You want to take this first, Jim?
Sure, I can. I fought many of my buddies, and we're good guys. Hockey players are all good guys. We're a tight community, and there's very few guys in hockey. Even if you didn't like a guy, like Rob Ray and I had the worst. You know, it was this act of as soon as we'd play, you know, we'd want to fight. I was his first NHL fight, and I think we fought, you know, a lot of times. I can't even tell you how many, but afterwards you would see each other and it was just like we were brothers, you know. And this went on through my years, that you go to the bar and you go over and, you know, and it was just like there was no hatred. It was just our job. It was just part of what we did. But you know, 99% of the time we'd have a beer together, and if we played the next night, we'd go out and fight again. That was our job.
He used the key word there, Jim, and that's good. Hate. We didn't hate each other.
No.
As Jim said, we went out, did our job. After the game, we met somewhere, and we were friends. We respected each other. Now, that doesn't mean on the ice we disrespected them. We were doing our jobs, which unfortunately 99.9% of the people have never been involved in, so they don't know the horrors, the physicality, and everything that happens and whatnot. That's changing. Thank God.
Let's close with this. And you both have addressed it to some extent already. What changes do you want to see in the game of hockey at both the professional and at the amateur levels, so it's the game that we can all enjoy and not worry that we're going to have to go through the psychological and physical trauma that both of you have? So, Jim, if you will go first, please.
Okay, at the pro level, I already said it. Take it down to one fight, you're out. I think everything else they're doing a great job. At the minor league level, being the amateur hockey, the kids, I would like to see more screening on coaches. I go to games and, 10-year-olds, the coach is F-bombing and screaming at kids, and that's not why kids play. They don't go there to be mentally and verbally abused. So I would like to see a better job policing the coaching in kids hockey, in kids sports, because that's just, there's no need for that. And that's pushing kids out too. Who wants to go and have some man screaming and F-bombing you? So those are the two things.
Well, Jim said it best. Backing up what he said, I agree totally. And he mentioned a little bit before about hockey having less and less registrations. Well, I think that the Canadian Football League is dying. If the National Football League in America doesn't come up and make it a minor league, in 5 years, maybe 10, there won't be any CFL here, which is good to a degree. Again, I go back on the 18. That's when body check should be introduced. The kid is older. He can understand better. He can effectively go out and tell and do what you're coaching him to do or tell him. So it makes sense to do that. I don't agree with fighting. I just, boom, you fight, you're gone. Now, in the book, I had a couple. No, I won't talk about Don Cherry, but I was listening, and I don't watch a whole lot of football or hockey anymore, but I was doing the dishes, as my job is to hear. And on my headphones, I was listening to a sports program, and one of the announcers said that Brad Marshall was one of the toughest guys in the league. I stopped because I've seen Marshall, and I'm not impressed. I went to the computer and dialed it up. He's had 12 fights in 11 years. Jim and I know people who had that in 2 weeks. So that doesn't make him a tough guy just because he yaps or licks somebody's face. And I hope I don't get sued for this, but it just doesn't make sense. So let's enjoy sports. Let's bring these little guys, little people up to have a great time and have a passion for what they're doing. So that's about it.
Very well said. Before we go, I've been instructed to read this note. I am not now, nor have I ever been on Tinder. Also, I am not now, nor have I ever been a love guru. So.
There you go.
But I do want to tell you both one thing. I started off by calling you both courageous. And I've left myself out of it because who cares? But I do want to tell you now, I've always been the guy in the stands that when there's a fight and everyone else is standing up, I stay in my seat because I'm not interested. It's not what I came to see. Tell me when it's over. I don't even really boo the opponents or my own team because they know when they're losing 6-1, but I don't go to see the fighting. I don't go to see people hurt. I don't get my sense of entitlement from watching somebody wearing the laundry I'm rooting for beat up the laundry I'm not rooting for. And it means so much to me and the people like me who think this is a beautiful sport that people like you have had the courage to speak up because it's not still a popular point of view to say we don't need fighting. We can still have hockey without fighting. And even with helmets, people say we have more stick fouls because there's helmets. And to me, that's like saying, well, let's take the bumpers off of cars because then people would drive safer. Let's just drive safely. Let's leave the people who want the bloodshed and want to go back to the Roman Colosseum. We have the octagon for that. But hockey is a beautiful game, and we know too much, and we've heard too many personal stories of too many people who have been hurt by this. So that's my rant, and I just want to tell you, I say this because of how thankful I am for people like you when it would have been easier not to speak up, and you did speak up. And I want to thank you both so much.
My pleasure, Glenn.
And I've got to say one thing, Jim. The WHA's 50th anniversary is coming up this fall. I have a good friend in Quebec City that's trying to put together some sort of reunion in Quebec City. And I promised him I'd try to get him on the show if he was going to get me a new car. So he's agreed that he's going to try to get me the keys to a new car, unlike you, Glenn and Paul, because you haven't showed up yet with that. So that's my 2 cents, but I appreciate this.
Alan, we would have given you a new car, except we know you don't drive.
Yeah, well, my wife does. That's correct. That's a good one.
Very thoughtful of both of you to spend an hour and a half with us. Continued success. If I may say so, keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you both. I'm honored to be on with you.
Hey,
all right.
great.
Have a good evening. Great. Good night, everybody.